Okay, then. So what I'm going to talk about this time is how to host your website, right? Like, so you've coded yourself some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and now you want other people to actually be able to see it. And to be honest with you, I think that really lies down here somewhere between infrastructure and browsers. Since the browsers are more on the front end, the infrastructure is more low level. So let's go to web hosting. So, web hosting. What is this all about? I'm just going to kind of explain the concept to you as I normally do, and then I'm going to show you some stuff on the screen. So, web hosting. Basically, in order to be able to serve up a website, right? And when I say serving up, I mean like sending people the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? You need a computer somewhere on the other end that knows what to send. Now, to do this, you could potentially set up your own computer. But setting up your computer is actually kind of a difficult task because one, you've got to set up your computer so that it goes through your firewall. So you've got to expose a public port to the rest of the world, which would then expose your computer to potential hacks, right? Because there's a lot of security issues that come with exposing a computer to the outside world. Also, you would have to make sure that the computer was always on, because if you ever turn the computer off and someone sends you a message in order to get their website, then you would, if the computer was off, they wouldn't be able to see your website, right? So basically, in order to do this kind of thing yourself, which is completely possible, don't get me wrong, you can do it. In order to do this thing yourself, you would need to basically set up a computer that would always run just for the purpose of serving your website to people. And if lots and lots of other people needed to use that website, eventually you'd need to buy new computers and stuff like that, right? So basically, what ended up happening is that people were setting up websites using their own computers, but then other like companies and entrepreneurs said, you know what, if we just buy a bunch of computers and make it easy for people to send their website over to us, we can be the ones that do it. And that's exactly what happens. So now what you normally end up doing is you go on the internet and you pay a monthly fee to grab a computer from someone else that is in the internet somewhere. And I'm going to put a cloud, but by that cloud, I just mean the internet. So now what we do is, instead of just having the HTML, CSS on our computer, we code it on our computer using the kind of thing that I showed before, where you have it all locally and then you just load it in Chrome. But then once your website's done and ready to go, what you're going to do is you're going to package up your code, your ones and zeros like that, which is just going to be HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and you're going to send it up to the web server. And now the web server in your browser is going to give you a client, where it's going to give you like a web page where you can just manage everything about it, right? So you'll be able to say, okay, what's the website name, assuming that you've bought a website name. It's going to say, it's going to give you the IP address in which you can get to it, and it's going to tell you how to upload everything, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just show you some of the like opening websites to these these guys that can give you servers. But I'm not going to go through the process of setting one up because there's tons of tutorials online. All right, so I'm just going to run you through some of the various places you can go to try and find web servers, basically. So GoDaddy is one of them. GoDaddy has been around for a really long time. And what you're seeing here is dedicated servers. So let's get away from that. Basically, what you want to look for is you want to find the web hosting part of the websites that you're going to. And they're just going to give you a bunch of plans. Now, at the end of the day, the only like at the end of the day, what you're really doing is selecting you're selecting a computer, right? Like they're gonna give you all these stats about the various like computers that they can give you, and you're really just selecting a computer to run your website from, right? Anyway, some of the things to look out for, just so that you can kind of understand what you're even looking at, is like you shouldn't really worry about the performance too much. It's not like you're making a crazy big website or anything like that. Like eventually you would, but you'd end up knowing more about how this works. But what you want to know is like how many websites you can host, right? Like this lets you host one website, so that means you're going to be able to send. It doesn't mean one page. You can host more than one web page, right? So if your website, if you click a button and it goes to another page in your website, you can still do that. It's just you can't host different websites. Like you couldn't have like website1.com and website2.com. It just wouldn't work. So the number of websites. The storage is useful because that tells you how much you can store on the server. The reason that's important is because if your website has tons of videos or has tons of images and stuff like that, those images and videos, they got to come from somewhere. And at this point in your web creation, where you're making like more basic websites, you're probably just going to put the videos and the images on the server itself. And so that's going to take up storage space. So as long as this, and another thing to think about with the storage space as well is like forums, right? Like if you allow people to input their own content and you're going to save that content onto the computer where the website is, where the web server is, then you need to think about the fact that you're going to keep adding data and saving data as you go along, right? So just some things to think about. Looking at storage is good. Looking at the amount of websites is good. 10 databases. I mean, we'll get into databases later, but that just means that you can use a database in order to organize some of your data, which can be useful sometimes. Unmetered bandwidth means that, I think that means you just don't get charged by bandwidth. You just get charged this monthly pass. So it doesn't limit how fast people can get to your website, because some web services do that. They will throttle, if you pay less, they'll throttle the speed at which your website loads and stuff like that. Don't worry about WordPress stuff. We're going to ignore WordPress. The fact that you get a free domain is kind of nice, right? Because that means that you don't have to go find a domain yourself. You can just select a domain from the ones that they have available, and it's like a free domain. So it's $13 a year. Makes sense. Now, one thing I will say is that in this kind of model here, like the economy plan from GoDaddy, you don't get a free SSL certificate. And that's kind of important, because an SSL certificate is what allows you to be secure on the internet. Now, we haven't talked about this yet. The idea that there's HTTP and then there's HTTPS, which means secure HTTP. In order to use HTTPS, you need to buy what's called an SSL certificate, which has a yearly cost associated with it. So like here it's $125, right? So like getting a free SSL certificate with your plan can be worth it, but you only need to do that once you're really going to try and make your website an actual thing, right? Like if you want people to connect to your website, not using the secure version of HTTP is very bad, because that means that the data that they send you is not encrypted at all. And when it's not encrypted at all, it means when in those previous videos we showed that like the signals jump from one node to another, that means anyone at any of those nodes could look at the data that you're sending because it's not encrypted. So that's GoDaddy. Like the prices aren't too bad, but there is a monthly cost to renting a web server to host your website. I looked on the internet. I just looked really quick what are the top 10 web hosting websites. I ended up finding one called, this is the top 10 site. I ended up finding this one called HostGator. I've heard of it before. Kind of the same deal. Like they pretty much offer the same things. Like, look, you get your free certificate and everything like that. Free domain included. That's important. Doesn't really tell you very much about like the speed of the website. But again, once those things matter, you will know enough to actually make a decision about them. The last one I found was called Bluehost. again, same sort of thing. They just offer different plans with different types of computer hardware, right? Different stats for the computers that you can buy. So basically what you would do, even though I haven't gone through it completely, is you'd select one of these plans, you would pay for it, right? And then you'd end up having some kind of page where you could upload your website to it, and they would handle the rest basically. It might take like a minute or two for them to spin everything up, but once that's done, they'll give you an IP address. And from the IP address, you could just type it into a browser on any computer and you'd be able to see your website.